This is an audio recording of Kensington Effect, written by Drinking Bear, as read by the Drinking Bear, with accompaniment from the Bard. Starting with the first arc, Gather. Chapter 1.
A burning cigarette hissed at the pull of air through its filter. Puckered lips exhaled a blue-white cloud of smoke into the air a moment later. Blue and white chucks tapped against a concrete wall in anticipation. "Get your shit together, Bobby," muttered a girl, taking another drag from her cigarette as she wiped her hands down acid-washed jeans and hopped down from a crumbling expanse of concrete wall. She walked away from it and shoved her hands into the pockets of a battered old bomber jacket, brown-colored and all made up of worn-out leather. She stopped and looked back at the building behind her, an old dessert factory. It may have been anywhere between 10 and 40 years old, out of commission by the way it looked. The posters and ads on the side had all faded away, peeling into half-colored papers that fluttered in the late autumn breeze. Windows were all the way up near the top and mostly broken out. Cigarette held between her middle and index finger, she lifted it toward her mouth but stopped. She looked back out across the vacant parking lot and settled her eyes on her old green Ford Mustang. It wasn't pretty, but it was the only car in the lot. That had given her pause. There were supposed to be other people here. 7, she thought to herself for a second, finally pulling the smoke into her lungs. If no one chickened out. She stopped for a second, letting the smoke roll out through her nose as she huffed quietly to herself, like I'm about to. Dozens to hundreds of messages and online bulletins had been leading up to this. She'd already deleted several Usenet accounts and stopped using a number of emails, afraid that they'd lead back to her real self. She'd finally started finagling with proxies and figuring out how to hide her online identity some time ago, and found a group of people similarly inclined to her. Those who had done it. The ones who had felt the change and felt the need to talk about it. It was an itch, and the longer you had it, the stronger that itch got. This wasn't the first she'd gone to, but it would be the first of this size. Rather, it would be, provided any more people showed up. She walked towards the doors of the factory, trying to well up the courage to push open the doors, but she stopped short again. She took another draw on her cigarette, the paper of it burning up close to the filter. She felt the acrid stench of the burning paper reach her nose, and she spit the whole thing onto the ground, where her shoe stomped it out. She didn't need to, but she ground her toe against it on the ground. "Am I just going to throw open the doors and walk in?" she muttered to herself. "And what? Show them who's boss? Make a big goddamn grandstand of myself to whoever's in there?" Her hands were already holding the handles of the door, and she gave them a testing twist. They groaned slightly, rusty from disuse. "Or am I just going to walk into an empty room and feel like an idiot?" She sighed, slowly letting up her grip on the door handles. She turned away and looked back out toward her car. She could just leave, after all. No reason she couldn't. She pulled her phone out of her pocket and checked the time. It was 5 after 6. 10 minutes until everyone was supposed to be inside. Maybe she could just back out and forget all of this. No one had seen her outside anyway. "Why are you making such a big deal out of this anyway, Bobby?" she grumbled to herself. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "This isn't a trap laid out by someone else to catch you at your most vulnerable. This is just people wanting to talk and hang out and... She stopped up, talking to herself out loud, and behind her aviator glasses she searched the corrugated steel beneath her feet. It's not a trap." "That's what you told yourself before Allie Henson's 12th birthday party, too," her brain couldn't help but say to her. "Right before her little brother pulled down your pants in front of everyone in your grade that mattered." Bobby felt her hands pull away from the door handle of the factory, and she groaned out loud. She hadn't even realized that she had grabbed them again. "Yeah, and that was great, wasn't it?" she mumbled to herself. "Led to a year almost lost in school. Months in front of the therapist." She fumbled a hand into her pocket, searching. "Fucking Burbank. Not sorry we left that place behind." And the time in between, her brain kept wheeling on her, plucking at thoughts she'd rather not think of. All those friends left behind, former friends at least, people that should have had your corner, People just threw you by the wayside. She found the cigarette package in her jacket pocket and pulled it out with trembling hands. There were 3 left. She pulled another free, rolling the filter idly between thumb and forefinger as she assessed the door. It was like trying to face down hell itself to her. Maybe something better awaited her on the other side. Maybe just another disappointment. That was right around the time Dad left, when everything went dark, wasn't it? Shut up, she muttered to herself, peering up at the door, her new cigarette held on the edge of her lip. All the way out to the edge of nowhere, where no one knew us, no one could. You've still barely been up to dealing with people, and it's been years. She shook her head again and began patting herself down, searching for her lighter. Shut up, she growled again. But even before all that, you knew you were different. Bobby didn't speak as her thoughts perturbed her this time. She found her lighter in the breast pocket of her bomber jacket and pulled it up, flicking at it quickly. You're one of them. The lighter's spark didn't take. The flames didn't light up. One of the Kensington kids. She growled and kept trying. The sparks still weren't taking. You're part of the new gen. Ugh, she hated that word. Some stupid hashtag on Twitter and Facebook. An apostate. Bobby threw her lighter on the ground. Damn thing was obviously done with. She flung her left hand against the door, turning the door handle, and brought her right hand up to level her index finger in front of the cigarette hanging from her lip. She turned the door handle and prepared to push her way into the factory. You're a freak. Her thoughts flickered back as flame erupted on her fingertip and ignited the end of her cigarette. The heated end of it grew bright as she took a deep breath in and blew smoke out between her teeth. And she stopped. The door handle had turned, but the door didn't move. It groaned eerily under the strain of her initial push, and the handle squealed slightly when she released her grip on it. It was locked. Bobby grumbled loudly and pulled a folded piece of paper from her coat pocket. It was a printout of the last post from the forum she had been visiting that designated this place as the meeting point. She scanned over it quickly and then got to the last lines. Come around to the side door of the factory next to the loading dock. I'll have it propped open for you guys. She sighed and shoved the paper back into her pocket before taking a walk around the building. She found the concrete loading dock where the ground dipped down to let the back end of truck trailers line up level with the metal shuttered gates. Up a short stoop of stairs, there was an exit door that she could see was just barely held open a crack by a piece of broken 2x4. Figures, she muttered to herself. As she rounded the corner, she stopped by an abandoned car that still had an intact side mirror. She adjusted the red-haired fall atop her head to make sure it didn't look too obvious. Her makeup foundation was still in place, hiding the freckles on the bridge of her nose and across her cheeks. The aviator glasses did a good job of hiding the vast majority of her face. Just in case someone from her school was here, she would rather not have been recognized. She pushed open the door and stepped inside. It was dark, musty, and filthy. Just the kind of place a stupid teenager agrees to a secret meetup for and then gets brutally murdered. Her thoughts still weren't helping her disposition. Off down a hallway, she could see some light, and she made her way down to peek around the corner. A ridiculously bright LED camping lamp was set up in the middle of the room, hanging above a circle of folding chairs on a long string of twine. A person off to the side was digging through an open backpack, pulling out some bottles of soda and a few bags of chips. She looked to be alone. The light of the lamp was casting her in shadows, so it was hard to see much about her, save for the feminine cast of her form. Narrow shoulders, slim waist, long dark hair. Bobby was almost a little jealous of her figure. Bobby cleared her throat, but the sound was dulled. She tried again a second later, pulling her half-smoked cigarette from her mouth just to blurt out, hey! The girl by the backpack jumped up and spun around. Stark yellow eyes turned on Bobby, like those of a cat. But that was less concerning than the rest of the girl. She was blue from head to toe, skin the color of very dark ink, and hair that was very nearly jet black. She was startled at first, but then showed a great grinning smile of pearly white teeth. Oh, you're here! The blue girl laughed. Holy crap! I almost wasn't expecting anyone to show, and, She cleared her throat and stood up straight. Here, have a seat! It was hard to make out her exact features in the weird lighting of the LED lamp, but she looked cute. Rounded chin, soft cheeks, ears that folded back just enough that she could hide them behind her hair if she'd wanted. Her nose seemed delicate, and her lips were full and thick. Her eyebrows, hard to spot among her darkly colored skin, were thin and wide, expressive if the lighting hadn't cast so much shadow about her. Bobby, for her part, tried to be appreciative and gave an uneasy smile. Thanks," she mumbled and fumbled a hand behind herself to find a chair before spinning it on one leg to sit in front of her, where she straddled it backwards. The blue-skinned girl pulled a phone from her pocket and looked down at it. "Oh, wow! You're actually early!" "Well, this is kinda out of the way," Bobby started to speak, her voice quieting toward the end. "Just wanted to make sure I didn't hit traffic or anything on the way, you know?" Taking another slow drag from her cigarette, she watched the other girl continue setting up. Good point. I never really considered traffic much when setting these meetings up. I don't really drive, so of course it's not really something I'd think too much about, you know?" The other girl was more energy in one person than Bobby had seen up close for quite a while. It reminded her of the cheerleaders she'd known back in Burbank when it was off-season and they weren't practicing all the time. During the rest of the year, they tended to be a bit tamer, always exerting their energy for pep rallies and things. But some of them, during the months just before summer break and during the summer itself, it was like they couldn't stop. Too much energy for one person to have. At least anyone not on drugs. "I shouldn't be here," Bobby thought again, turning her head to look to where she had come from. She took a slow breath. "Just leave. You know this isn't going to work." She wasn't sure how long she'd been sitting there, quietly thinking about just getting up and walking away. She was shook from her thoughts by a folding card table thumping down in the middle of the room as the blue girls started to set it up. Bobby realized her cigarette was mostly ash now. She let it drop to the concrete and stood up, stepping out the flinders. Another glance to the door and Bobby spoke up. "So, hey, She started to speak, but then heard approaching voices from the hallway she'd used to enter the building. There were 3 distinct voices approaching. Looked like it wouldn't just be Bobby and this one other girl. Bobby felt her heart lurch briefly, and she bit her tongue. God, I am an asshole. "Let me help you finish setting up," Bobby said, moving to the blue girl to help her set out bags of potato chips, red Solo cups, and bottles of soda on the table that she had produced, seemingly from nowhere. Then she moved on to setting more of the LED lamps around the room so the shadows weren't so stark. The first person to walk in from the hallway was a chubby, tallish girl using the flashlight on her cell phone to light her way through the hallway and into the room. She took long strides as she stepped into the room and took a look around. She had long, black hair tied back in a ponytail, already arched eyebrows contoured slightly with makeup to appear slimmer than they already were. Her nose, while on the short side, had a wide base and a curve to it that, along with her olive-tinted skin, belied Italian ancestry. She wore a black jacket over top a bright yellow and blue striped dress that extended to her knees, and overly large hoop earrings. Fan of the 80s styles, it seemed. Right behind her, a boy even taller than Bobby walked in. Dark-skinned, with tight curls of black hair cut close to his scalp, he walked with a slight hobble, probably due to how clearly overweight he was. He wore a denim jacket with metal studs along the shoulders and decorating the wrists. A t-shirt for some band that Bobby didn't recognize lay beneath the jacket. He gave an easy smile as he glanced about the room. Trailing in a moment behind him was another girl, smaller than anyone else there. She also kept her arms close to herself, trying to seem even smaller. The overly large black hoodie didn't help. Her frail-looking face showed skin almost dead white, and there appeared to be no hair on her head. Instead, she had feathers, white with bands of black, brown, and tan, longer on the back of her head, and shorter, hair-like feathers closer to her face. Feathers ran down her body, beneath her clothes, and over the length of her arms, stopping near her wrists. Her eyes were solid black and heavily reflective. Although her skin was without pigment, the angle of her jaw and her almond-shaped eyes gave the sense of Asian ancestry before her physical changes manifested. She stopped short upon seeing the setup in the room and looked overly nervous. Well, I guess I don't have to worry about being recognized, Bobby thought to herself. The The blue girl bounced across the room to where the others were coming in, arms folded up in front of her chest with hands balled up under her chin. She rocked back and forth on her heels with a grin like a child on Christmas morning. "Oh, it's so good to finally meet you all!" she exclaimed, and then moved back a few steps before putting her right hand out in front of her. "I'm Megan!" The others took her in, and all, save for the pale-skinned girl, returned her smile. The first girl with the black hair took a step forward and shook Megan's hand. "I'm Marina. Pleased to meet you, too." The tall boy nodded and shook Megan's hand as soon as Marina had released it.
Name's Lionel. Nice to meet you, Megan.
I'm Ashley, the last girl said, moving to find a seat without shaking Megan's hand. She glanced about the room a little and picked up an empty cup before her eyes settled on Bobby. So, too, did everyone start to look to Bobby as they found seats. She lifted a hand to wave toward them and slid off her aviators to reveal green eyes beneath the protective lenses. "Hey, I'm Bobby. Nice to meet you guys." Megan started pouring soda into the cups on the card table and handing them out. "I'm so glad you're all here. This is the first time I've set up one of these and people have actually shown up."
How many of these have you thrown out lines for already?
Lionel asked, taking the cup of offered cola and picking up one of the snack-sized bags of chips from the table.
If you don't mind me asking.
Megan lifted a hand to run a finger down the edge of her ear, brushing her hair back over it in the same motion. I think I've put out about 5 invites in the last 8 months or so? Lionel quirked a brow at that, looking around at everyone else.
I hadn't seen any of the threads about meetups anywhere near Phoenix before this one. Well, not the last 8 months anyway.
"Oh, I'm just not actually from around here," Megan grinned, taking a seat back into one of the chairs. "I'm a little bit disappointed that the other 2 people that RSVP didn't show up. Let's see, that must have been, Lionel swallowed his drink and spoke up.
The guy who went by the forum tag Washburn was picked up by the Bureau of Impaired Affairs last night. Apparently he'd put a spear through his own dad's chest after some arguments or another.
The black-haired girl, Marina, covered her mouth with one hand. "I read about that on the news this morning. How awful."
But that doesn't cover the point I was making, nor what you mean.
Lionel turned back on Megan.
What do you mean that you aren't from around here?
The blue-skinned girl grinned sheepishly, looking around as the others drew their curious gaze to watch her. Lifting a hand to the back of her neck, she chuckled quietly. Hey, why don't we do a round of, show and tell? Get one another acquainted with what our powers are. Yeah, that sounds like fun.
End of chapter 1.